Welcome to the second part of Mr. Riley's dissertation overviews, hopefully helping you with your non-examined assessment piece, your independent investigations. So this was the second dissertation I did at university. I did a 4-year MSci course. Unlike most geography graduates who do a 3-year course, I did a 4-year course on the basis that I knew I wanted to go into a bit more depth and detail. I knew I was going to go on and teach, and I wanted to do more on both sides of the course, so to do some more human and physical geography to help me when I was teaching later in life. So this was given in right at the end of my 4th year. The title was Students' Perceptions of the Relevance of the Secondary School Geography Curriculum. This is obviously a curriculum back in the early 2000s, and was proof, if ever was needed, that these projects are not only important things that you can talk about in interviews, but actually things that sometimes you can win things for. So actually, unbeknown to me, the university had put my dissertation forwards for a prize, and I won a dissertation prize from the Royal Geographical Society that year for my dissertation. So what was the purpose of this? Well, fundamentally, it was done off the back of an Ofsted report in 2008 that argued that provision of school geography was weak, but this damning report didn't really talk about what in the subject they saw to be irrelevant. So I kind of wanted to explore which parts of the geography curriculum used in secondary schools in England students perceived as relevant and irrelevant, and why that was the case. Whether the skills obtained through the geography curriculum were perceived as relevant, so not just the core knowledge, but actually the skills that are picked up as well. And then an investigation into broader issues, so things like the relevance of fieldwork. Finally, I wanted to unpick whether gender, age, or ethnicity were significant enough variables in the perception of geography, and I used a lot of statistical tests to determine that. So my literature review, what did I look at? I looked at 2 main things, really. Firstly, the national curriculum. I looked at the history of the curriculum, its contested nature, the issues about whether a curriculum needs to be relevant, issues about kind of knowledge versus skills and values, and what was key to that. Then I looked at really geography specifically as a national curriculum subject. So its history that's been very contested since its initiation, its role within the curriculum amongst other subjects, the particular threats it faces as a discipline, its future in a globalizing world, and the relevance of the subject more broadly. So what did I do? I went out and I collected loads of questionnaires, and I picked questionnaires because I could get big data sets that I'd be able to crunch large numbers of stats with. So I got 550 questionnaires done from 4 different schools, and in each of those schools I asked 1 class per year group in that school. I also picked questionnaires because it meant that I could get responses quickly, and that would minimize the impact in the schools participating and hopefully increase the number of schools who said yes to helping me with my work. So it was only going to take kind of 15 minutes in a lesson to complete. So my questionnaire was a mixture of open and closed questions. The open questions gave students an opportunity to explain some of the answers they'd gone for. The closed ones allowed me to get big data sets. So I spent a long time when I was putting this together researching other people's pieces of work on how to avoid bias in putting questions together. So I thought that was really important on my questionnaires. And I learned a lot actually from reading books just about questionnaire design and things like that. Importantly, I piloted my questionnaire. I did that in a school that I was doing a work placement in. And I got some students not only to answer the question, but then to sit down with me afterwards and talk through exactly what they thought the questions were asking. And that was a really insightful way of trying to find out exactly whether students had read the questions the way I'd intended them. And I made some minor tweaks to the questionnaire off the back of that process. So what did it look like in the end? Well, my data presentation in my dissertation was things like lots of bar charts. So up in the top right, you can see one of the bar charts here to a question that asked students about their most and least relevant overall geography topics. And this bar chart here is showing the percentage of student votes to different responses. So running along the bottom are different geographical topics, so kind of left to right, agriculture, famine, industry, migration, population, those kind of things. And then you've got a red and a green bar on there, and the red ones were the most relevant and the green ones were the least relevant on there. I ended up putting together lots of data tables about what people would have said, or the differences that I found in statistical ones. So down in the bottom right, here's some things highlighting significant differences in the prevalence between G is gender, AG was age group and S was school. So looking at whether there was differences in the responses here to an open question between different schools and different genders and different age groups. I actually took the ethnicity one out in the end because the schools that I went to, the cohorts that I used, didn't have a broad enough ethnicity mix for me to do any any meaningful data analysis with that. And that's absolutely fine in terms of a piece of research, and you need to acknowledge that sometimes. And sometimes you just need to cut things off and say, this isn't working. That's what I did with my dissertation. As I said, this is a no-go anymore. There's not as much data as I thought was going to happen. So I binned it. So what did I do? I did content analysis for the open responses. So it was similar to what I did in my first dissertation. And I've learned obviously lots of things from that. I did some tests of difference. So I was looking at differences between boys and girls, different ages, the different schools. And I did that with chi-squared. I used another test that we don't do with the A-level curriculum called the Kolmogorov-Smirnov test. And that looked at whether there was kind of voting bias compared to what we were expecting. I did some tests of association, some Spearman's rank to see whether there were correlations between different data sets. And what did my conclusion show? Fundamentally, that environmental geography was seen as more relevant than straight human or physical geography, and there was an overwhelming consensus that that was the kind of key to the important bits moving forwards. The individual topics seen as most relevant: population, weather and climate change, agriculture, glaciation, rocks and landscapes seen as less relevant. It also showed both in the statistical side of things and the qualitative side of things, it showed that relevance and enjoyment were strongly linked. And it was a kind of clarion call more than ever that it's really important to get things that students perceive to be relevant in a curriculum to get them to like your subject. So another thing in terms of my conclusions is I actually gave a set of conclusions to each individual school that participated. So they were anonymized in the dissertation, but I gave back a pack of data that was about sort of 80 pages long or so to each of the schools that were participating, on the basis that that was a kind of thank you from me for their time and their participation, and was a hook into those schools to get them. I told them from the offset that that's what I'd be doing, but a hook in to get them in to participate. Hope you've enjoyed that. That's